Hello, everybody. This is Chris McAdoo, Chief Experience Officer for Knoxville Entrepreneur Center, a nonprofit business accelerator located right in the heart of downtown Knoxville, Tennessee, dedicated to changing lives through entrepreneurship. And I am stoked to be joined today by Daniel Clark with 3D Solar. Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your company.
Yeah, so I'm a serial entrepreneur from California. We make 3D solar modules from glass waste that have double the power to ensure that homeowners and solar installers cut their electric bill in half and cut the solar install time in half.
Okay, so that's pretty well. So you have you studied solar engineering, like all of this stuff? Tell me a little bit about your history.
Sure. Yeah, so actually in 2008, I believe it was when Obama was elected, there was like a green stimulus that was able to give funding to schools to be able to study solar. And I was just shocked that there was really no schools before that even taught you about solar, so I was super excited about that. And that's how my kind of journey with solar started in about 2009.
Well, and this is not your first rodeo,
No.
right? So you kind of did the whole, I would call it the storybook version of the young entrepreneur. Is that as a young man, your company started to take off, but that company was not in solar. Tell me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So we were actually building vertical gardening systems for other companies and folks, and so it wasn't your typical vertical gardening system. We called it the octagon. So we had, just like the UFC octagon, 8 by 8 foot hydroponic walls, and we would basically take them from standing flat to positioning them vertically in the shape of an actual octagon. And so what happened is we were able to increase the yield 300%. And that's really when I was like, okay, I'm going to school for solar. Solar's flat, but the earth is round. Maybe there's something going on here. And I'm like, well, heck, if we can get 300% more yield growing plants vertically in 3D, why wouldn't it work with solar? And that's when I went on the internet and I saw MIT in 2012, they had 3D solar towers. So they actually built like towers vertically, and they proved not only double the power like us, but up to 20 times the power. Wow. And they actually said in 2012, the reason we haven't commercialized this is because the manufacturing technology doesn't exist to enable what we want to do. They said, well, if we could put like dimples and 3D structures in the cells, this would be even better. And they're like, but that manufacturing doesn't exist. Well, we invented that manufacturing in 2020. So we basically took 3D printing and we modified it to have the geometric flexibility of 3D printing, but the speed of casting and molding. So imagine making complex micro 3D glass structures. Normally it could take a couple days to print that. Well, with this new process, we can like pop out 6 by 6 inch substrates that are microstructured in glass like every 20 seconds.
Wow. And tell me, what brought you to, that setup, and what brought you to using essentially like recycled glass waste to build everything that you're doing?
Absolutely. Well, estimates indicate that by 2050, there's going to be tons and tons of solar panel waste in landfills. And I was just kind of really sick of the dollar store mentality we have. We've kind of had it ingrained in our culture over the last couple decades. And examples like the LED dollar flashlight, yeah, it's cool. I like it. But, it breaks after like 2 weeks. When you actually crunch the numbers, you're like, wait a minute. Like if I just buy like a mag light, I wouldn't waste so much. And so the reason why, we do what we do is to ensure that future generations have clean air and healthy water. And a way to do that is to enable green solar technology and making it from the waste that is in landfills or glass waste from other companies.
Well, and let's get into the dollars and cents of it. So
Absolutely.
When you're talking about, sort of double the power, you're going to cut my, electric bill in half. How does that work? And give me some real world examples.
Yeah. So right now, when let's say a residential solar installer buys maybe a truckload of solar panels, probably from China, the levelized cost of energy per kilowatt hour is probably like 1 to 2 pennies is the price, and the price of electricity is like 11 cents. So like, oh, that's pretty good. But the difficulty in installing the solar system and the time it takes and the degree of difficulty bumps that price up to about 22 cents per kilowatt hour. So if you're, in California, not a big deal, right? Because the price is outrageous there. But every other state, it's about 11 cents. So if you're local in Knoxville, for instance, you're like, well, I'm paying about 11 cents per kilowatt hour. Why would I want to pay 22 cents, double that, when I could buy Daniel's solar panel that's at about 6 pennies per kilowatt hour? So instead of paying 11 cents, they're getting their solar for about 6 pennies, and then we actually have a 600 watt sodium ion battery cell in the back, and so we're changing the game with that. So you probably don't know, but the battery management systems and batteries only last 5 years, but the cells last 20 years, and so there's a problem with that. And so by putting the battery in the back of the solar panel, we basically decentralize it, and we're able to get a cost per kilowatt hour out of the cycling of the battery of only 1.7 cents per kilowatt hour. So to give you an example, if you install batteries now, like if you have a flat solar system and you have N-phase microinverters, and then you say, well, I want a Tesla battery with that, it's very difficult to make it interoperable and to get them to be installed together. If you do, the software glitches, and number two, it's about 40 cents. You're at about 30 to 40 cents per kilowatt hour when the price of electricity is 11 cents. And so that's really the reason behind that. Obviously the solar is cheaper, but then also the battery. So what happens when the sun goes down, basically the microinverter we use basically stops. And then so we actually have a way to step up the voltage on the battery to trick the microinverter to thinking it's a solar panel, and then so it starts discharging the battery at night to the home. So now if you're like in developing country in Africa or like some other place where they need like water and like they need food, this would be the way to do it a lot more simply and cost effective.
Well, what do you see as, I'm kind of thinking about that, not just localized service here, but around the world. What do you see as that service potential as the population grows and as access to energy and power needs continues to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we designed it like this. I mean, the initial larger 3D design that we validated years ago, it was great, but it was $4 per watt to make. So that's why we essentially were like, okay, well, that works. Let's pull a Honey I Shrunk the Kids and shrink the structures down much smaller so it's much cheaper, like I told you, to make. Now, how will that affect the world? It's going to affect it in a big way. I mean, developing countries like South America and Africa, they have really low disposable incomes. And so we can have a few different solar designs. We can have one where we laminate it and then it becomes even cheaper, where we can penetrate those markets, those disposable incomes. I mean, we're competing against, people that are very serious about making solar panels in other countries, and they have a lot of state subsidies. And so we're pretty confident that we have a way to kind of help usher in these panels to that developing world. We know oil is here to stay. Developing countries are going to use it, or countries that are starting to develop it. It'd be nice to get some solar out to those countries too. And help those areas where there's no water or there's no electricity. There's just a lot of places where there's kids that would like to go to school and they can't. And it would be nice, obviously, to make money, but then use it for like a positive benefit too for society.
Well, and what do you see as the future of the solar industry as a whole?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that it's going to be kind of like a curve, because our 3D solar is on a different kind of curve. It works from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and the flat panels only work from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. So in California, they have a problem called the duck curve, where the Chinese panels work from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. because the sun's directly hitting it.
Yeah.
Well, when that sun goes parallel just a certain degree, it falls off a cliff, and they stop working, so they need a whole bunch of energy from 3 to 7 p.m. And right now, they're buying those batteries that cost 40 cents per kilowatt hour, when they could just use our panel, and it'll work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So we'll get that very stable power output throughout the year, and even in the winter. In the winter, the solar panels, they just don't work. If you have a 12 kilowatt system, they're usually rated for the summer. You probably need about 50% more for it to work effectively in the winter. So since we have the 3D structures, they just work extremely well in the winter too, and that's proven by MIT also.
Well, and you've spent some time in Norway, where obviously
Correct.
the light situation is very different there.
Yes.
So your panels and your technology is set to work in, not like you're saying, not only in sunny, bright California, but all around the world.
Absolutely. So there's different wavelengths of light. There's like a blue light, and then there's like the Chinese panels. They usually work on like kind of a harvest sun, an orange kind of HPS type of light. Well, Sweden has that blue type of light. And so if you use like perovskite and other semiconductors, they work very well in that light. So gives us a strategic advantage. Also, they have sunlight 23 hours a day in the summer. So if they really figured out a way to work it out there, they could probably send that power, find a way to store it and send it down to Europe, maybe in the winter or something.
Well, that's awesome, man. What has it meant for you to come from, from California to here, right in the heart of the Tennessee Valley? What's it meant for you to become part of the Knoxville ecosystem as well as part of the Techstars ecosystem?
I was super stoked. I was prospecting in California at a Mason Lodge, so they told me this big story. They're like, yeah, did you know, like, the president, he started TVA, and, like, he was a Mason, and, like, you might not even know about him, but by research, I'm like, wow, he was really famous and well-revered. He helped create TVA and all that cool stuff, and so I'm honored to be out here. I love it. It's a great place, very manufacturing heavy. Unfortunately, in California, it's really software based. So for me, they're like, well, how do you like it? I'm like I said, I'm like a kid in a candy store. We're very heavy in manufacturing, and so while we don't really have the semiconductor edge over here, the manufacturing's here, and so we're excited about potentially doing our manufacturing here locally.
That's awesome. And if someone wants to learn more about your company, 3D Solar, where do they go?
Yeah, you can go to our website at www.3dsolar.co, Charlie Oscar, or you can see us online too on LinkedIn. We have some cool posts, and there's a whole array of media articles about 3D Solar or T3DP online where you can, read about the advanced manufacturing advancements we've made.
Awesome. Well, Daniel Clark, happy to have you, and happy to have you in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.